Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Hubric, and I'm the president of Hubric Resources. And we are delighted here today to have Cat Garrity-Frans on the call. The subject of today's webinar we're doing is HR challenges in family-owned businesses. So just real quick about Cat. Cat's a family business consultant with Compass Point. Compass Point's just an amazing company that we've worked with for several years now. We've seen them do some great work with several of our clients. CAT helps the family-owned businesses navigate the unique challenges that come with them in terms of balancing family and business. She works with clients on strategy, succession, and generational transitions. And as a next generation business owner herself, in her own family business, she brings both the professional experience and personal understanding of the opportunities and challenges that businesses face. Just quickly about me, if for those of you who may not know me, because you might be Compass Point clients, the name of our company is called Hubric Resources. We're a full-service HR consulting firm. You name it, we do it from an HR perspective. A really big chunk of our businesses, our clients are family-run businesses, and we too are a family-run business, right? So my wife Kim is our co-founder, and she is the vice president of our firm. So we have lots of experience in several different angles, right? So all right, well, listen, time is valuable. And we want to pride ourselves on starting and ending on time. So in terms of logistics, we will be happy to answer questions at the end. So if you post your questions in the chat, we'll be happy to answer them at the end. And yeah, and we'll be recording this, so we will most certainly send this to everybody who's signed up for for the webinar here today. So. All right, Kat, you ready to dig in?
We're ready.
All right, let's rock. So, all right, let's just start with what makes people challenges in a family business is different from other organizations.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Tom, you understand, right? Because as you stated, you're a family business of your own. So I think the biggest difference is that a personal relationship existed before a business relationship existed. So the personal relationship will always continue outside of the business. In a traditional company, if somebody isn't performing well, you can address the feedback, you can address the performance needed, and you get to go home at the end of the night, and you don't really have to think much about it. When you're in a family business, that person might live under your roof. They might be somebody that you talk to every night. They might be somebody that you're about to have a holiday dinner with. So you have years of history, family dynamics, and emotion entering a business conversation, and that can be very challenging. There's obviously there can be so many issues around, accountability and roles and compensation, which is some of the stuff you and I will talk about more today during this time. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're not just dealing with a business issue. You are dealing with a family relationship at the same time. One of our clients that we've worked with, there was a next gen family member being prepared to eventually take over the business. So they were going through leadership development, succession planning with us, and there was quite a lot of things going on, and things were going really well. And in some of the conversations with the next gen, we found that this person wasn't really sure if they wanted the role, and they didn't know how to vocalize it. They felt an enormous amount of pressure because mom had built the company and she had expected my daughter's going to take it over. So they're afraid to bring it up because it's not turning down a job. It's, turning down a legacy and continuing a family's legacy. And that is a very real thing in a family business. Will my mom be angry? Does this change our relationship? Who will I be in the business if I'm not the successor of the business? What will other people think? So there's all of these like deep emotional thoughts and feelings when you work in a family business. And yeah, again, like I said, at the end of the day, you can't just really go home and turn it off. I mean, you have the prime example of you are both living under the same roof. So if you have a disagreement at work, it can be really challenging to address that and move forward and in a healthy, productive way.
Is tough, right? And I see that certainly to be the case. The other thing too I find is, like with Kim and I, we talk about work 24/7. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I mean, we're brushing our teeth in the morning talking about work and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, and sometimes we say to ourselves, we're having all these conversations and all this dialogue, and it's, like our staff should really be in the loop
Hmm.
these communications, right? So, but it's hard,
Absolutely.
and that can certainly be a challenge. I see that too.
Yeah, and I think it's a healthy balance, right? Like you need to be able to say, okay, can we just not talk about work for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Let's just focus on our date night, not talk about work, right? It's like not talking about your kids on a date with your spouse. Like it's
Hmm.
very difficult to do, but to your point, like it's a healthy balance and getting both sides in that agreement of, okay, let's focus on this right now and let's talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, certainly being putting things away is,
Yeah.
like we're
Hard.
not going to talk anymore. It's like Kim and I use the shoebox method where it's like, okay, so here's our problem. We take
I
out the
love it.
shoebox, we deal with that problem, and then we put that shoebox back in the closet, and it's like we're not talking about that anymore.
Yeah.
So, but
I
yeah,
love it. I love that one. All right. So, from a liability perspective, Tom, what are some key issues that you see with your clients?
yeah, yeah. So, I guess the first thing we just need to recognize is a lot of times family businesses will pay their family members more money and they'll give their family members more benefits and perks and things like that, right? So, and please know, like, you're a business owner. You took all the risks and challenges and everything to get to where you are, and there's the rewards that come with that. Where some of the areas that we said, there's probably two key ones that come out. The first one is in pay practices and how you're paying your people, right? So let's say that you run a manufacturing firm and you have one of your kids who's in college. They're coming home and they're going to work on that production line right next to 10 other production workers that are on that line, but you're going to pay your family member $10 an hour more, and maybe that's an excessive number, but let's just say you're going to pay him $3 an hour more. But and let's say that family member is a guy, he's 20-year-old, college student, and but the other nine people that are on that line working with him, let's just say hypothetically they're all female, you know,
Hmm.
or some other protected class, right? Well, how can you justify
Yeah.
that you're paying your son more money compared to the other folks that are clearly more experienced and have been doing this most likely a lot longer,
Hmm.
and so there can be a discriminatory effect that you could be challenged on by doing that, right? So
Yeah.
so you want to be careful with that too. And the one thing that Kat, you and I have talked about this over the years, even things like family vacations and things like that. So the family goes to Europe for 3 weeks every year, right? And well, but maybe you only give 2 weeks vacation a year to all of your other staff, right? So there can be some improprieties there. And I'm not going to say that's necessarily a legal issue,
Hmm.
but it most certainly is a morale issue for
Absolutely.
for folks. The second area that we see, and this is kind of an awkward one, but it has to do with like harassment issues, like unlawful harassment, sexual harassment, and some of it's very subtle. It's not overt, but what happens with business owners oftentimes is, they started their business and they've been running their business for 20 years, and they've kind of become the kings of their castle, right?
Hmm.
And business owners just become very used to doing what they want to do, right? So if you would talk to my wife, she would tell you that I was a terrible employee. until we started our business because it just, and that's the way most entrepreneurs are wired, right? We don't like
Hmm.
rules. We want to do what we want to do, right? But what happens sometimes is we'll see that business owners, or it could be next generation business owner, next generation family members. Not that you would ever do this, Kat, but they could be behaving inappropriately with staff, right? And flirting or just the typical. A lot of times it's just the very typical harassment issues that are, jokes or flirting or, whatever the case may be. But you have to hold your family members to the exact same standards as a non-family member when it comes to these things. And I especially looked at business owners too, right? I mean, because there's times I've had multiple conversations with business owners, like multiple times over the past 22 years we've been in business, where one of the business owners ends up having an affair or some type
Oh,
of a intimate relationship with
yeah.
one of the employees, and it's like what
Things a little awkward.
and just think of the impact that has on a family business where maybe your wife works there or your children work there. So
Yeah,
not only are you going to get sued for this, and by the way, you are going to be perceived as most likely having deep pockets, right? But it's going to tear the whole family apart, and it's going to create just chaos within the company. And
absolutely.
so, I would toe a very tight line when it comes to that type of behavior and allowing that type of behavior to continue in the workplace.
Hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, have experienced the second part of your answer quite a few times, just even in conversations with people. I mean, one that stands out was dad owned the business, son worked for the business, son is now president, dad had an affair, and it got really messy, right? Because him and his son are working together every day, and the tension, and I remember talking to other people from the company, like the tension between the two individuals is so strong and it's so incredibly awkward. And what do we do, right? And it puts a really tough position on your employees too, to your point.
Yeah.
um the other thing I wanted to comment on was the compensation part. You and I have talked about this too. I think it's easy to say if a family member wants to come join a business or you're recruiting them to come to the business, whatever it might be, it's easy to kind of match their salary of what they were getting paid at their previous job, which may have been more if it was, corporate America versus a small family business. I remember myself when my dad and I started talking about this idea of coming to work for Compass Point. And he made it very clear early on, like, hey, we're not making any exceptions here. Like, you are going to be starting at this level because that's what you're qualified and competent to do, right? Based on your experience. And you'll
Hmm.
start there at the same salary as everybody else. And of course, there's other things, on the ownership end that you can do. And to your point, different benefits of being a part of a family business. But I think that's so important to stick with what you tell your employees in terms of a pay structure, pay scale. The family members have no exception. And it just talk about building credibility and having people respect you and wanting to work for you and your business. I think that's a big, big piece of that.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, let's move along, Kat.
All right.
What are the most common HR or people issues that you see with your clients?
Yeah. So probably a lot of the same that you see. I would say probably the biggest one is different standards for family members, some of which you just talked about with compensation and vacation time, PTO, whatever it might be. But I think the biggest thing I want to point out here is whether you believe it or not, as a business owner, employees notice when family members get flexibility or opportunities that other employees don't get. Had multiple people say, no, 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 like that's people don't notice, or no, that's not us. We don't have to worry about it. And they do. And the reason I know this is because when we start working with our clients, we do a discovery phase where we do anonymous surveys and interviews. And this comes up every single time is this idea of, well, they get this, and I don't want to say anything because I know they're a family member, but that's not fair. And here's how I feel about it, right? And it creates that environment of what the heck. And so that would be probably my number one. Number two would be a lack of role clarity. So back to my point of coming into the business, what is your job? What is your 30, 60, 90? What does your job description look like? And you guys have obviously been great in working in clients we've worked with together, helping make that happen. Because if you don't know what you're doing every day, it makes it really hard to be successful and
Yeah.
very easy for employees to look at the family member and say, well, what the heck are they doing all day? Um, and then the last thing is promoting people based on loyalty rather than their abilities. So if an employee's been there a long time, or back to if they're a family member, I think this is again those top three things we see consistently. And they're hard to address, but they're fixable, right? Like there's ways that you can fix all three of those things and make sure, you set those same standards in your company too. So those would be some of my top, but I am curious, do you have any to add? Because I'm sure you
Yeah, I
have
mean,
quite a
yes.
few.
I mean, you already touched on it, but I just want to emphasize on the one, and I see this so often, is family members don't have job descriptions,
Mhm.
right? Like everybody in the company has a job description that clearly outlines what their job is, but family members often don't, right? So I think it's very important for you to, have an org chart and, do the
Mhm.
traditional org chart and job descriptions and duties and, so that way, and, even coming down to what time you're going to come to work and what time you're going to leave work, right?
Absolutely.
Because it just makes things a lot clearer, and it helps everybody understand what
Hmm.
that person's role is within the company.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, what do you think causes morale and turnover issues amongst non-family employees?
Yeah, there's lots of issues, and some of these overlap into regular companies as well,
Hmm.
non-family business. But within family business, obviously, there can be extreme nepotism. Like sometimes there are just so many family members working in a business, um, and there can really be. Um, oftentimes it's just a perceived favoritism that
Hmm.
happens because people are family members, right? The other thing too is there's we find that sometimes employees will feel as though there's a glass ceiling, that the only way they could possibly make it, up to a senior level role in the company is if they had the same last name, right? Or due to their bloodline, if you will. So I think it's very important for companies to create career pathways and succession plans and the like, and make sure that the non-family members know that there is a clear path forward for them
Hmm.
within the organization. So, other things too, like we have a client, and they yell at each other all day long, and it's the culture of their family,
Hmm.
and I've talked to them about this, like, Tom, you don't understand, we're Italian, that's the way we talk to each other. And I'm like, yeah, but just because you guys like to yell at each other, and they're like, we're not yelling, it's just the way we talk. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't talk to your non-family members like that, and nor do they want to hear you guys screaming at each other all the day,
Hmm.
all the time. Like it's
Not a fun
inappropriate.
place to be.
Yeah, it's inappropriate behavior. Like, who wants to deal with things like that? And we've already talked about some of the other things, but like some of the things that are partially my pet peeves, but other things that I see employees deal, like there's a client I'm working with right now where one of the family members literally parks his vehicle in a handicap parking spot right in the front of the building, and he's not handicapped. I think he's in his 20s or early 30s,
Mm.
and oh, by the way, now the employees have to walk by his car parked in a handicapped spot, What type of message does that send to employees? Same thing holds true with like reserve parking spots, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and again, you're a business owner, you want to have perks and but how does it make you feel, for example, if you're somebody who starts work at 5 a.m. in the wintertime and it's cold and maybe it snowed and you've got to park in the back of the lot and walk all the way up and walk right by, this reserve parking spot for the owner who, may not be coming in till 9 o'clock in the morning, right? So,
Yeah.
I would, things like that. It just, it's just something that it can just damage morale, right? And people don't
Hmm.
realize that it does, right? Same things hold true with, why do certain people have the bigger office? You know what I mean? Like, does their position justify that? And the other thing I'll say too, and this is one thing that business owners and non-family businesses too, it's like your employees want to see you. They just do, right? So
Hmm.
good old fashioned walking management by walking around and just getting out and spending time with your employees is so important, right? And it's the problem is that's like when your calendar gets crazy busy, that's like the one thing that you can wipe off your calendar, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
but I would really recommend also too, like when's the last time you've had lunch in the lunchroom with
Mm.
with the employees, right? Like go
Yeah.
break bread with them, get to know them. Like they want to know you. They really want to see you. So
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. We were with a client yesterday, and we were asking about, what's one thing you're focused on this next week, and they had recently made quite a few hires. And his thing was, he said, I feel terrible. I don't know three new hires' names. And it's a big company, like over, I think, 150 employees, over 200 actually. And anyway, he's like, we hired these people and I don't know their names. And I need to know their name because they keep calling me out and saying, You're Mike, what's my name? That's the example. And I just think it seems so simple, but for him to point that out, I thought was such a moment for him to say, no, like I understand what's important. I understand what matters to my employees, and I should know their name, and I want to know their name, and I want to get to know these people on, a professional, personal level. So yeah, it seems like a simple task, but to your point, it's so easy to wipe off the calendar. So I think that's great.
yeah, 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 for
Yeah.
sure. So what have you learned about earning credibility as a next generation leader? Because that has to be tough, right? Like
Hmm.
you almost kind of need to prove yourself. Because people think, oh well, Kat's Tom's daughter, so is she here because she's truly qualified, or just because she's Tom's daughter? The other Tom,
Yeah.
your dad's name's Tom. Sorry.
The other Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's something that I think about every single day. I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking about it, because it's really hard. Like be it's hard to be a next gen. And as much as that's really hard for an employee to be able to see that, it's like, okay, it's not that hard, right? Like you got it easy. You're so and so's daughter, Tom's daughter in this case. Um, I think it's really challenging. And I will say, I think for me, a big part of earning credibility is not being the loudest voice in the room. Like when I first started, for example, I have a big voice. I love to talk, love to talk. And I think that was really challenging for me because it was okay, sit back. You're not the star of the show. You need to earn your credibility. You need to listen. You need to understand where the business is now, how are we here? How do we get to this success? And I need to respect the people who helped build it to that. I didn't build it to that, right? Of course, I'm Tom's daughter, but I haven't been a part of the business. I haven't been the one putting in so much of the work. And at the time I came in, we had multiple employees, still do, that have been there for 5+ years. And anyway, like that to me, I think is a really important piece of being a next gen. it's important to earn trust by following through and making good decisions and showing people that you respect what came before you while still being willing to help move the business forward and showing that you're committed. We have a client who has done an exceptional job of this. A daughter joined business, and I watch her in our leadership team meetings, and she is not the first to speak up. She has fantastic ideas. She's not always the first to speak up, but when she does, it's impactful, it's important, it's relevant. And she's by far the youngest. I think she's the youngest at the company, and she's by far the youngest on the leadership team. And she just knows, like she has that intuition of when is appropriate and when's not. And I can tell the respect that she's earning at the table. And again, I just think that's a super important piece. It's really easy to come in and try to prove yourself like, oh, I deserve to be here. Like I'm not just so and so's kid or aunt or uncle, whatever it might be. I have experience. I did this prior to coming and joining the business, but it's not about that. It's about where you are
Hmm.
now. And again, hopefully, you're being hired for a very clear job and you have a job description and you know what's expected of you. But it's about what goes on outside of your day-to-day job. Like, how do you treat
Hmm.
other people and how do you treat employees and not acting, like you're any better than them because of your last name. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's hard, with like I was telling you about the Jeep parked in the spot. Well, you
mhm.
know, if it was any other person, I would just walk up to that person and say, "What the heck are you doing?"
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? But
right. Hard.
it's the
Feeling
owner's
so good.
son, you know what I mean? So it's hard. So, Kat, do you think it's a good idea when in a family business for when the owner of the business maybe is bringing in family members that the owner talks to the other members of like the leadership team and say, listen, um, I know this is my son or my daughter or my whoever, but I am giving you license to speak freely with me if you have any concerns with this person at all, and just open that door and remind them about that, just so that people don't feel intimidated, because at least then you can say, well, you gave me license, so here it is.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I also think it's a great idea for a family member to go through the interview process just like everybody else did. To just get the job because, your family is not the best look, right? Talk about
Hmm.
the same standards across the board. And to your point, what a great opportunity to involve your leadership team and give them make them feel important, right? And give them some power. I'll speak about my boss, John. He has told me consistently, I would be telling you this if you were Tom's daughter or if you weren't Tom's daughter. Like, has nothing to do with the conversation. And for
Hmm.
me, that's really helpful. Like him just saying that puts me in a position of, oh, okay. Like it doesn't take that completely out. And I mean, we've had challenges, right? Just like everybody does. And hey, like let's address this. Has nothing to do with XYZ. But I do think it's important. And
Hmm.
it's given him permission to be able to give me hard feedback and me not be like, well, dad, so and so said this about like, no, you're a grown-up woman. You
Hmm.
don't, it's perception and
Yeah.
it's how people feel like they can give you feedback. And it's challenging to accept feedback, but important.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, before you ask the next question, Kat, just for everybody out there, we're about halfway through. So if you do have questions, you want to start thinking about entering those into the chat. Okay.
All right. This is one of my favorite questions for you, Tom. Should a next gen family member work outside the family business first
Yeah.
prior to joining?
Yeah. There's a lot of research on this. So I would say this: it's not practical in all positions or companies, but I would say most of them it is. So why do it, right? Well, first off, it creates credibility, right? So if you've gone off, and I had client that I talked with. They were an engineering firm, and the owner required his son to go work for another company or other companies for 5 years before he
Hmm.
could come back to the company because he really wanted him to, prove himself, because there's a self-esteem issue for yourself too, right? So, to really say, okay, well, I can do this and I can succeed. I don't need to be a member of my family or my family business. So there's a self-esteem issue for the person as well. But again, it also really builds credibility with your coworkers. If you've gone out and you've done this job and you just didn't, come out of trade school or just come out of, high school or college or whatever, and boom,
Yeah.
you're working for the company. So I really like that to happen. Frankly, oftentimes I see business owners struggle with that more than like their
Yeah.
next gen, right? Because they just
Yeah.
want them there. It's like, we need you, and
Save the
so
money.
yeah, yeah. So I do like that. Also, working with different companies, you can go out and learn all kinds of skills and ideas
Hmm.
and see how other companies are doing things. I mean, you can even, maybe this is a strong term, but you can almost be like a spy, like let's go see what our competitors are doing, and is there a way that we can bring that back to our company? So, I do think, and also it builds a network, right? Like having somebody
Absolutely.
work outside the company, you're building a network of people outside of just your company. So,
Hmm.
those are the key reasons. But again, just to reiterate the last one, which I think is very important, is that self-esteem, right? Like you had
Yeah.
mentioned to yourself about coming back in the you coming back to the company. Well, you certainly proved yourself with your career, long before you came back to you came you to, when you came to Compass Point. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, and I just think from a self-esteem issue, that's very very important, very very
Hmm.
important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we always say go work somewhere where your last name doesn't matter. And
Yeah,
I think that it and if you didn't go that route, right, seen plenty of success there too. But when you think about building your confidence and self-esteem to your point, and then also kind of like you're able to choose, like, I want to come back to the business, right? Like I'm ready now. Or maybe you know what? I don't want to come back, and that's
yeah,
okay too.
yeah.
And you're given the opportunity to see a different side of the world in terms of business. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Great add-ons to that, Cat, too. And I have seen that happen too, where people they go get a job someplace else and they're like, you know what? I I
Yeah.
I don't want to, be part of the family business, and that's a whole other discussion. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
not for this. So, um, so yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, what have you learned about earning credibility as a next generation leader?
Next one. You already asked me that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
All good.
Why is holding family members accountable so difficult?
Yeah, so this is a very challenging question. It's a good one, but it's challenging. So, I think families can easily confuse, or family member can easily confuse accountability with judgment. Performance feels personal because you're not talking to an employee, you might be talking to a family member, right? And the fear of damaging a relationship can cause people to avoid those hard conversations. I mean, even if you're a non-family member, it's hard to have a hard conversation. Throw being blood on top of it, it makes it really hard. And I think what works is kind of creating those clear roles, measurable expectations, and the same standards for both family and non-family. Um, you kind of move from the idea of, I don't think you're doing a good job, to, hey, here's what we agreed this role requires, and here's where we are today. Here's where we might be able to do better. So kind of like depersonalizing accountability and making it no, like this is about the business. And everyone on the call may have not heard about, what hat are you wearing? Are you talking to me as my dad, or are you talking to me as the owner of the company? And I think that's a really great way to separate the two of those things. Um, I think we see this often. I'm sure you do too. I know you do too, Tom. But family businesses where next gen might not be meeting their expectations and nobody's addressing it. To your point, right? You gave the example of parking in the handicap. Well, who's going to say it? I'm not saying it because not my kid, right?
Hmm.
And its supervisors are hesitant to give feedback because, well, how's the CEO going to react? Are they going to be okay that I just gave this critical feedback
Yeah.
to their family member? And again, like having those tough conversations is crucial. I think it's back to you have to separate the family and the business. Yes, they're intertwined, but having clear expectations, a clear reporting structure, back to what you were talking about with having an org chart, who reports to who, defining what accountability looks like. That's really important. We throw around this word all the time and nobody actually knows what it means. And then creating an avenue to have those conversations without it being personal, without it making it personal. And I think that goes on a supervisor when they first start supervising somebody. It's that conversation is probably the first thing you should talk about of, hey, I'm not going to be afraid to give you feedback because of this. Are you okay with that? Right.
Hmm.
And getting that permission and creating that safe space because the next gen deserves that too. Like they want to be better. They may potentially be running the company someday.
Hmm.
They deserve that feedback as well. So I think it's a great example of why accountability is harder in a family business because the conversation does not always end when the workday ends, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
it continues on. So I think that's crucial.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and again, I know we're, again, just to reiterate, we're talking about challenges here today, right? So, I mean, there's lots of amazing benefits and family members. I mean, I know most family members of businesses, they work a whole lot harder,
Hmm.
than other employees. They work crazy hours because it's there for their business and they're invested and they don't want to disappoint their parents and, and all those right things, right? So, but just to reiterate,
Yeah.
that's not the case. But, even things like doing performance evaluations, right? Like that's another thing. Like, you should be doing those things, right?
Hmm.
So I guess doesn't it just boil down to treat the non-family member the same or treat the family member as though they were a non-family member? Like, you know,
Genius.
could we encapsulate this whole session
Maybe that's what we should have
into
named
that?
this.
Yeah, yeah. But it's obviously not. That's not always practical for sure. So,
Sure.
um,
All right. So my next question for you, Tom, do you feel like next gen family members should report to non-family members?
yeah, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I think we've already talked about this quite a bit, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, of course, you should have a reporting structure. That isn't the case. I mean, I think about our clients that are not family business owners and they have nepotism policies, right? That basically
Mhm.
say that you cannot supervise a family member, right? Because it leads to favoritism and potential and all those potential negative things. Same thing holds true, right, with a family business, right? So having somebody report to somebody other than a family member, if that's possible,
Mhm.
is always a good idea. And also giving that manager license and freedom to manage that person, but also talk to the employee and say, listen, you're not going to get any special favors here, just like your Tom did with you.
Mhm.
So, and I do find I'd say the majority of business owners, they do hold their next gens to sometimes even higher standards than
Yeah,
than than others. So yeah, for
great.
sure.
Spot on.
Then,
I'm not going to add anything to that. You nailed it.
yeah, yeah. Um, So what about like difficult conversations, right? Like how do you cope with those?
Yeah, it's challenging in the seat we're in, which is why we're hired to do what we do, because we hear different things in different conversations, right? So we might have a individual meeting with somebody, they tell us one thing. We have an individual meeting with another person, they tell us another thing, right? And it's all right, bringing those people together because the last thing we want to ever create is a triangle where we're sharing different things, right? That's not our job. Our job is really to help families and companies have conversations they know they need to have, but they really just have no idea where to start. Um, like I said, we create that neutral environment where people can ask questions. We can ask the right questions, right? Because sometimes back to, I don't know what to ask. How do I even like bridge this conversation? Um, Help family members work through some difficult topics so they can gain clarity and alignment and a path forward. Like that's truly overall what the goal is of a lot of the work that we do. So, I was thinking about this question and an example, and I feel like I know this has happened a lot. And I think it's probably happened to a lot of people out there. So a client that we worked with, the founder was ready to step back. He knew who was going to lead the company. It was going to be one of his kids. And he was like, yep, we're set there. Then had a conversation with the next gen. They were under a very different impression. And they thought they'd be hiring an outside president to come in. And because they didn't want the pressure, responsibility, all of that, right? Two very different conversations. And it was, okay, number one, we need to figure out, okay, is the next gen committed to taking over the family business? Are they able to, right? Or do they have the competencies? Or do we have the functions of what a CEO is for this company? Like, what does this look like, right? And I know, again, that's a lot of the work that you guys do. So bringing the family together and having that conversation, understanding what each person wants and why, understanding their why behind it, and then coming to a common, agreement and path forward. Helping people get internal thoughts, especially families, internal thoughts out on the table, creating just openness and clarity around roles, expectations, and just who
Hmm.
you are as a family business. So, ultimately in this case, the next gen took on the CEO role, and it was a successful transition. But to their credit, right? They may have never known, oh crap, this is what's expected of me, right? Like you need to create a successful path for them. Otherwise, well, then how do you expect somebody to be successful if they don't even know what the assumption is, right? So again, we see that a lot, where a founder might be or might not be ready to step back, but the other side of that is maybe they don't have a kid who's qualified to do the job, and that's
Hmm.
okay too.
Hmm.
And having that tough conversation of, hey, we're going to start looking for an external CEO, right? And it's hard as a parent or aunt or uncle, whoever, family member, to give that feedback to a next gen saying, you're not it. This is what we need, but bringing it back to the job and the functions and what is actually needed for that role has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's everything to do with what is needed in that job. So I think you probably greatly agree with that, and probably see that a lot with a lot of the work that, I mean, again, stuff that we've worked on together, but um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not always the personal piece.
And it's a shame, but like business can be cold, right?
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, if somebody is not performing in their role, you have a responsibility as a business owner to address that because it's not fair to the health of the company, and it affects everything. So yeah,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure, Kat.
Um, I'm trying to think. I think that was my last question to you,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Okay.
So, well, let me ask you this question. What advice would you give to a family member about building a healthy organization?
Yeah, I think,
And I should say to clarify, for the next generation.
yeah, I think For I guess for the I'll answer that in two parts. So for the current gen, I think building an organization that you want the next generation to inherit. One of the greatest gifts you can give the next generation is structure and clarity. So if you can
Yeah.
invest in governance, so creating a structure for how decisions are made, if you can invest in leadership development, not only of your next gen, but also of your key employees or emerging leaders. And then lastly, communication. So like what does the meeting rhythm look like? Are we ever meeting, right? Are we meeting once a week, once a month, whatever, right? Creating that. And I think as a next gen, greatly appreciate that, right? Because there's structure in place and it's not you're walking into to nothing. Um, so those would be my things. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple odds and ends. One of the things that we talked about is the glass ceiling and how that can affect people. Career pathways are something that's it's the buzz right now, right? And
Hmm.
what we're finding is younger generations when they start with a company, they want to see the path forward. Not just, oh, I'm going to come to work and I'm going to work hard every day and then with hopefully I'll get promoted, for my efforts. The younger generations, and it makes perfect sense to me. They want to see, okay, if I come in and I do my job, and maybe I get these certifications or trainings or whatever it is, then I should expect in 2 years to get promoted to the next level. I'm just using production for an example. You start
Yeah.
as a production worker in a production line, but you know what? If you do a good job and you come to work and your quality is where it needs to be, and maybe you need to have a cert for some type of a quality initiative or something. You do all those things, then at year two you're going to get promoted, right? And
Mhm.
then on up the line from there. Employees want to see that. The best example I can give of that, if you've if you have you ever been to a Bucky's, Cat, by chance?
I
Um,
haven't, but I want to go so bad.
oh
I
yeah,
see it
yeah,
all the
yeah.
time.
So it's quite an experience for
Down
if
south,
any of you
right?
have not. Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
moving up. They're coming up north here
Oh, this is
too.
great
So
news.
yeah, yeah. So but when you walk to the door of this giant, gas station experience. Right at the front door, there's a signboard there, right? And the signboard shows cashier. It shows the pay ranges for the positions, right? And
Hmm.
it shows that cashiers make like $20 an hour. It's pretty good, and then they make it to the supervisor. That's like 23 an hour, and then and it just goes up and up and up, and it shows the employees right there, and then I think the store managers are like, you know, $200,000 a year, whatever
Wow.
I don't
That's
remember the
easy.
exact numbers, but it was such a powerful message because not only do employees who are walking by that sign every day see, gee whiz, if I work really hard, this is the progression I can see in the company, but it's also a recruiting tool for them too, right? Because
Absolutely.
every customer that walks through there goes, maybe I should work for Bucky's, right? Um,
Absolutely.
a couple
Oh,
of
that's
things a couple other things I would say too is, a lot of times I'll hear my clients say, we're a family-owned business," and they say it with pride, and that's great, right? I'm very proud to be a family-owned business as well. But when it comes times where it's like, I was talking to a client a couple months ago about they're below market for some of their positions, right? And they're like, "Well, Tom, we just can't afford to pay those people the market wages because we're a family-run business." Right? Well, so basically, what I'm trying to say is don't promote yourself as being a family-run business as a good thing if there's no extra perks or benefits to the employees. You know what I mean? So there has to be a reason why for you to promote yourself as. Yes, promote it with your customers and things like that. But I've heard employees say that too. It's like, yeah, great working for a family-run business. The only people that benefit from this are the family, right? So just
mm,
to be a little careful with the messaging there. But yeah, those are all the things that I wanted to to add to that. But we do have a couple questions, Kat. So why don't we jump into that next phase? And
Okay.
some of these are interesting. Yeah, here's a good one. How should HR address situations where a family member or owner's spouse is regularly engaging in personal activities during working hours, such as online shopping and making personal appointments when employees see it and begin to perceive that there is a double standard in expectations and accountability?
I'm gonna let you answer that one first.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? So yeah, and I've seen this a lot too, right? And the challenge is, of course, when you have a setting where the owner's wife, who, let's just hypothetically say the person really isn't qualified to do their job. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And they, of course, come in and they get a really nice office and they get a nice job title and things like that. So right off the gate, employees are kind of like not happy with this person because they're not qualified to do the job, but they're there. And then, uh, they come in late, they leave early, they do all kinds of things that other employees can't do, right?
Mhm.
And it creates just a tremendous morale issue for employees, especially when it's shoved in their face, right? Even things too like Amazon packages, like I see that all the time too, where companies, there's all these Amazon packages that are being shipped,
Mm.
to the company for the owners, right? The struggle is, what advice do you give to that business owner, right? So if you're let's say you work in human resources or you
Mhm.
work in some other position and you see that this is real really damaging the morale of the company, I guess I would recommend that at the end of the day, you should muster up the courage to say something. But you really have to know the business owner, because what happens if that business owner goes to their spouse and says, "Oh, by the way, guess what Jane said about you and how you're not doing
Mhm.
your job," right? So, um, unfortunately, I don't really have a tremendous piece of advice to give to you other than, um, you know. Like part of me wants to say, if that why is that person even there, right? I mean, if that person is really adding no value, they're creating morale issues and things like that. Should that person even be in the building? Now, having that conversation, having crucial conversations, right?
Yeah.
Having that crucial conversation is very important. I guess what I would say is, if when you do have that conversation with the owner, don't just say, "Oh, by the way, your wife is doing this and she's doing that and doing this," all these things. Let them know what the impact is of those things, and let them know how that's affecting the
Yeah.
employees. Yeah, that's a really tough one.
It
Kat,
is.
anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, we have this saying like to always assume that people have best intentions, and until proven otherwise, right? And for this question, I think about this idea of like expectations versus agreements. If no one ever addressed what the expectation is of, hey, you can't do this, and here's why, if nobody ever had that conversation, it's hard to hold somebody accountable to whatever it is you're trying to get them to agree to. And expectations, people like if I have an expectation of you, Tom, and I just have it in my head, right? Oh, I expect Tom to ask the questions today, but I show up with no questions back for you. Well, then this is gonna be a very one-sided webinar. Whereas we had an agreement prior of, okay, this is how this is going to go. You walk me through it. We both had questions, right? And we had an agreement of how this was going to go. And I think it goes back to everything with supervision. If you have a supervisor who's setting the expectations and an agreement, that is that is really important. If you don't have that, well, of course you're going to think you can get away with anything. Not that people want to get away with things per se, but hey, like if you don't put them in the shoes and say, hey, this is what that looks like, and here's why you can't do that, or here's like people don't do that in general. This is standard for the company. I think it's really important to set those agreements with people so they understand what's expected of them and what's
Yeah.
not allowed.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you may have mentioned it too, but like maybe this is the good time to have that job
Yeah.
description, that detailed job description, and maybe you say it's time to update job descriptions for everybody, and just have a conversation and say that we want to create job descriptions that really truly outline everybody's responsibilities and their duties
Hmm.
and their work schedules, and but we shouldn't have an employee handbook that has all these policies that says these are things that you can't do when the owner is blatantly doing, or the owner or the owner's wife is blatantly doing them
For
in
sure.
front of the employees. So it just comes down to having that conversation with the owner,
Hmm.
but that takes huge courage to do that.
Absolutely. Not an easy conversation.
Yeah. Again, here's the next question. How can a company hold themselves accountable when one of the family members is not performing or has become toxic to the environment?
I'll take that one. I think this idea of taking away the fact that they're a family member, how would you treat any other employee? And go with that. Are they aligned to your core values and are they productive, right? That would be an A player if they're both of those things. If they're aligned to your core values, but they're not productive, right? Maybe they're in the wrong seat. Maybe they need training, right? But that's a B player, right? And then if they're not aligned to your core values and they're not productive, like that is a toxic employee, along with if they're productive and they are not aligned to your core values. Like you really want to make sure, and this goes back to even hiring, like you want to make sure these people, especially family, are aligned to your core values. And I think that's an important piece of it. And if this employee is a toxic person, regardless of who they are and what their last name is, you would treat them the same that you do any other employee. And, if that means a performance plan or that means some tough conversations, I would encourage all of those things. And again, take away the fact that who they are and what their last name is.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Some other questions here. I'm just moving along because we only have a couple minutes. If you are part of leadership and the owner wants to hire a spouse without the necessary skills to take over a position that is currently filled, how do you handle that? Even if we are part of the interview process and come out knowing they aren't qualified. That's a tough one.
Yeah, very.
Again, I think some of this stuff starts at the top, right? I mean, it starts at the top about having, if you have a owner or owners of a business that truly want to do what's best for their company, then, setting those standards and those expectations up front, as we've been talking about through this session regarding we're going to hold everybody to the same standard, I think one of the ways I like to tell clients sometimes is that remove that person's name from the resume. And
Hmm.
would you consider hiring this person if it wasn't your spouse or a family member or what have you? And if the answer is no, you shouldn't be hiring the person. It's not good for the health of your company. It affects your bottom line. It affects morale. It causes so many different issues, and I know that we all know that. And then especially in this case, where they're taking over a position that's currently filled, I'm not sure if that implies that they're going to let somebody go or not. But there's not. If so, there's obviously legal issues with that if they're performing well. Um, but yeah, I just think again, you got to have those difficult conversations, and sometimes I'll have it too, where I'll have an employee say, "Hey, I'm going to quit. I'm done with this. I just can't handle it." And then I'll say, "Well, why don't you talk to the boss?" And they're like, "Well, I just don't want to. Or I'm afraid, or whatever." Like, if you're quitting, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
like why not? Like, 'cause it's like a lot of times
Yeah.
it's like I really like my job except for this one thing, you know.
Hmm.
Well, if you're gonna quit, you got nothing to lose. So,
Agreed.
well, listen, it's Kat.
Absolutely.
As always, it's just a delight speaking with you, and really appreciate our partnership with Compass Point. And for all of you who are on the call, thank you so much for being part of our webinar here today. You certainly are welcome to reach out to Kat or myself for to talk about anything that we talked about here today or how we can help your businesses. So thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Tom. Bye.
Bye.